April 2025. America is no longer quiet. From the heart of Washington, D.C. to the small streets of Florida, crowds poured out, thousands strong, angry and unstoppable. All 50 states felt it. The chant was simple: hands up. Not for attention, but as a wake-up call. Trump's new tariff policy, sold as a fix for the economy, backfired. Prices soared. Farmers lost exports. Small businesses stumbled. The very people who once believed in him are now the ones hurting the most. Meanwhile, Elon Musk's government overhaul cut hundreds of thousands of federal jobs, fast and without warning. Offices shut down, services vanished overnight, people snapped. This was no longer about politics. It was about survival. They marched not for a party, but for their future. This protest? Just the beginning. The protests started on the National Mall, but soon they spread like wildfire. Within days, over 1,200 protests erupted across the U.S., from bustling cities like New York to remote towns in Alaska. Retired scientists, sunburned farmers, veterans, and young people, each with their own reason to protest, stood together in frustration. They had been promised policies to make America great again, but now they were living the chaos. Higher taxes, rising costs, job losses, and closed services. What started as isolated voices soon became a massive wave of tens of thousands flooding America's streets, and this wave was just getting started. In the heart of Washington, D.C., National Mall, it is no longer a place for tourists to leisurely stroll around. That day, it turned the epicenter of a social earthquake. More than 20,000 people flocked here, not to see the Lincoln statue or walk by the lake, but to speak up together. They don't come alone. About 150 civil society organizations appear together, from groups protecting labor rights, women's rights, to environmental organizations. They all share one clear goal: declaring war on what they call the flagrant abuse of power by the Trump administration and the reform team led by Elon Musk. Among the sea of people, one face stands out: Terry Clean. Retired biomedical scientist from Princeton, New Jersey. No longer a white blouse, no longer a laboratory, she stood in the middle of the crowd with determined eyes. She did not shout, but her words made many people nod. The tariffs that Trump just imposed are not just numbers on paper. They are strangling America's economy from the gut. The stage did not need lights, because the anger of thousands of people was enough to light up the entire square. And in the heart of America's power, the voice of protest is louder than ever. The protests weren't just loud, they were heartbreaking. In Washington, D.C., Democratic congressmen like Jamie Raskin and Ilhan Omar stepped up, not as politicians, but as citizens fearing for the country's soul. They warned, if we do not act now, there may be nothing left to save. New York was a sea of hands-up signs, but what truly struck people were the quiet ones. San Friedman, 84, a World War II nurse, joined her first protest holding a shaky handwritten sign: "Don't cut medical research, we need to live." Beside her, retired lawyer Paul Grimm whispered, "My life savings could vanish overnight." There is no war here, yet the elderly are marching to defend their right to survive. This is no longer a protest, it is a warning. The uprising was not limited to America. On the other side of the ocean, Americans live in Berlin, Paris, London, and Frankfurt also took to the streets simultaneously. There are no tears from relatives, no houses that are shaking because of rising prices, but they also feel pain because their homeland is gradually losing control. In London, Chakonga Square was crowded with people. Ukrainian and Palestinian flags flutter next to banners with text, "Heads of Ukraine," a sarcastic and angry reminder to Trump: please stop irresponsible interventions in global affairs, because every wrong decision has consequences not only in America, but also around the world. In Paris and Berlin, the crowd chanted slogans against its harsh domestic and risky foreign policies. Protesters don't just worry about America, they care about the negative influence that America in the Trump era is bringing to the whole planet. Anywhere, even thousands of miles from home, Americans still feel the weight of an administration that is out of touch with reality, and they choose not to stay silent. Day, April 1, 2025. America woke up to a gift that no one expected. A new tariff policy, 10% tax on all imported goods from all countries, officially takes effect. The Trump administration calls this economic shield. to protect domestic production and bring jobs back home. But after just a few days, that dream turned into a nightmare. Stock market red like a spreading fire. Index Dow Jones freefalled more than 1,500 points within a week, the sharpest slide since the dark times of the COVID-19 pandemic. Big guys like Walmart and Ford quickly announced price increases, while thousands of small businesses, dependent on imported raw materials, began to struggle on the brink of bankruptcy. What was drawn up as a golden plan for the U.S. economy is now suffocating the market from the inside out, leaving the question no one wants to face: who is really bearing the consequences of this policy? Amid the sea of people at the National Mall, W. Hoffman, 73 years old, former financial manager, stood quietly in the crowd. His voice was not loud, but each word rang out like a wake-up call. It's farmers in red states who once supported Trump wholeheartedly who are now the ones getting the short end of the stick. Immediately after the 10% import tax policy was applied, China and Canada did not hesitate to respond. U.S. soybeans and pork are taxed by Beijing up to 25%. Agricultural product exports to China, the largest market, dropped dramatically by 30% in just the first 3 months of the 2025 year. States like Iowa, Kansas, and Nebraska, which was Trump's electoral bastion, has now become an economic storm zone. Farmers not only lost the market, but also lost the entire crop, and workers lose their jobs and income. And worst of all, many people, like Mr. Hoffman, began to see what they had saved for their entire lives, their 401k retirement accounts, evaporating day by day. "My friend lost more than $30.00 in just 1 week," he said, not taking his eyes off the phone screen, where the stock index continued to plummet. What was once promised to be bringing jobs back to America has now become blade rotates backwards, cutting deep into the very people who believed and voted for that policy. And the scary thing is, this is just the beginning. The numbers from the Peterson Institute for International Economics are not empty warnings. They predicted that America could lose up to 2.5 million jobs in just the next 2 years if this tariff policy remains unchanged. Which industry suffered the most damage? Agriculture and manufacturing, the pillars of American labor. The factories of Ohio, the fields of Iowa, now face an uncertain future. And then the most bitter thing is this: the policy designed to protect the American people is turning the knife back on them. From farmers who lost their crops to workers who lost their jobs, everyone is feeling the feeling of being left behind in a war they did not choose. When Elon Musk officially took office, he didn't waste a minute. Just within first 3 months of term, America witnessed an unprecedented major surgery. More than 200,000 federal jobs were eliminated, and not in the obscure places. Vital organs like SSA, IRS, USAID all take turns going to the cutting board, particularly at IRS tax department. Near the 75% of employees disappeared overnight. Elon Musk did not shy away. On the contrary, she proudly declared, brought the federal machine into one wood grinder to cut back $2 trillion, 0 cents in spending. But what's in return? Social Security offices, SSA, across the country closed one after another. Millions of elderly people, disabled people, and people in need of assistance suddenly had no place to turn to, called but no one picked up, sent documents but no one processed them. Standing in front of the office door only saw a sign, "Stop serving until further notice." Reform has not been seen, only seen chaotic, and confusion spreads day by day. Amidst the sea of people at the National Mall, Mrs. Linda Foman, 65 years old, stood quietly holding up a handwritten sign, "Hands off Social Security." Her figure was small, her hair was silver, but her eyes were burning with anger. She said, "From the age of 16, he started working, contribute every penny to the Social Security Fund. Now, after nearly half a century of work, what do you get? Offices are closed, calls that no one listens to, and the subsidy amount is not enough for her to pay for medicine, electricity, or buy a decent meal." No one taught her to take to the streets, but anger spurred her to action. Her banner was more than just a sign. It quickly became one. Symbols spread throughout the protests, from the East Coast to the West Coast. The White House did not sit still. Spokesperson Liz Hostin rushed to reassure the people, pledges the administration will protect welfare and Medicare for eligible people. But right after that, he turned his nose, blamed the Democrats because they want to pour their budget into programs for illegal immigrants. But on the streets, under the cold spring weather, not many people want to hear who is blaming. They just know that they have been betrayed. And this time, they were not silent anymore. In 2017, protests under Trump were mainly about women's rights, climate change, or immigration policies. Most of the people on the streets at that time were progressive, young, and live in big cities. But 2025 is completely different. Anger now comes from the people who voted for Mr. Trump. Loyal voters who believed in the slogan, "Make America Great Again." Texas, Michigan, Ohio, red states that were once solid as rock, now witnessed thousands of people poured into the streets, holding up the Hands Up banner, not because of a far-fetched ideal, but because they are really hurting. Prices of everything increase. Inflation in the first quarter of 2025 jumped to 3.5%, and the reason is obvious: import taxes. People have to pay extra for each basket of vegetables, each pair of jeans, each fill-up of gas. It's no longer the worry of the future, it's the bill that's looming right in front of them. Goldman Sachs then issued a cold warning. If tariff policy continues, US GDP could decline by 1.8% by 2026. That is no longer a number for experts to discuss. That's lost work, the factory is closed, it's a shortened meal. And so these protests are more than just voices of protest. They are signal of a turning point, when a part of the American people are turning their backs on the dream they once pursued. The end of April 5, 2025 did not bring calm. On the contrary, it leaves a clear echo: your stick hits your back. Tariff policy and government reform plans were expected to save America, but now they are pulling people into difficulties, pushing society into a spiral of instability. If no adjustment is made, President Trump and Elon Musk will not only come under fire from political opponents, but from itself, people who once raised their votes for them. History has taught when people have nothing left to lose, they will take to the streets. And when millions of people took to the streets, that's no longer a protest, it's a sign of an uprising. April 5 might just be an opening chapter, but if the government does not hear the call from the people, the next chapter could be a political storm unprecedented in modern American history.